The purple sky cracked open with electric fury as Everett regained consciousness. His head throbbed, and the crystalline sand beneath his fingers felt like broken glass. The Colonial Alliance transport ship that had carried him to this Class 15 death world was now a smoldering wreck behind him, its hull peeled open by the atmospheric electrical storm like a tin can under a combat knife. Everett pushed himself up, cataloging injuries with the practiced efficiency of a combat medic. 3 cracked ribs, possible concussion, multiple lacerations, nothing immediately fatal. His medical pack had survived the crash, though the same couldn't be said for the pilot and navigator. "Small mercies," he muttered, retrieving a self-injecting vial of broad-spectrum antibiotics from his pack. The planet's atmosphere alone was enough to kill most humanoids within hours. Microscopic crystalline particles suspended in the air that shredded lung tissue with each breath. His respirator had thankfully remained intact. Growing up on an isolated ranch in the outer territories had prepared Everett for many things: self-reliance, adaptability, and a deep understanding of animal care. Those skills had served him well through medical training and his subsequent assignment as a frontline combat medic with the Colonial Alliance. Caring for wounded creatures, human or otherwise, was embedded in his nature as deeply as the scar tissue that mapped his experiences across his skin. The storm intensified, violet lightning striking the distant crystal formations with increasing frequency. Everett needed shelter, and quickly. His survival training told him to stay with the wreckage, but the ship's power core was destabilizing. In a few hours, it would flood the surrounding area with radiation. Retrieving what supplies he could carry, Everett stumbled toward a rock formation that might offer some protection. The respirator's filter would last 12 hours at most in these conditions. After that, a low, guttural sound stopped him in his tracks. It came from behind a cluster of crystal formations, a sound unlike anything he'd heard before, yet unmistakable in its nature: pain. Something was suffering. Every instinct told him to keep moving, to focus on his own survival. But those same ranch boy instincts that had guided him to medical service now pulled him toward the sound. Medical training and compassion overrode his survival imperative. Cautiously, he made his way around the formations, one hand on his sidearm. What he found made him freeze in disbelief. Sprawled on the crystalline sand was a massive predator, easily 4 meters from snout to tail, with iridescent scales that shifted between midnight blue and violet. 6 limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and a ridge of spines ran from its head, down to a barbed tail. But what truly marked this creature was the silver insignia emblazoned on its armored shoulder plate, the royal crest of the Korean Empire. "A Vorak," Everett whispered in awe. The legendary apex predators were the companions and mounts of the Korean royal family, symbols of their dominance throughout the galaxy. Stories said they could tear through battleship hulls and withstand direct energy weapon fire. They were also supposed to be extinct in the wild, existing only in the royal breeding grounds of the Empire. Yet here, one lay, gravely wounded. A deep gash ran along its side, exposing muscle and bone. The creature's breathing was labored, each exhale releasing a fine mist of blood that crystallized in the electrified air. Everett took a step forward, medical instincts already assessing treatment options. "One more step and I'll vaporize your head." The voice, cold and precise, came from behind him. Everett froze, then slowly raised his hands. "Turn around, slowly." He complied, coming face to face with the barrel of an energy rifle held by a tall, regal figure in ornate armor. The purple-black metal plates were inlaid with the same royal insignia he'd seen on the Vorak's shoulder plate. The helmet retracted, revealing a humanoid female with silver-blue skin and eyes like cut amethysts. Her white hair was pulled back in an intricate braid, interwoven with metallic threads that caught the light of the electrical storm. Queen Cora of the Korean Empire, the most powerful sovereign in the galaxy, stood before him, her rifle unwavering. "This is a royal hunting ground. Human," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality despite the threat. "Your presence is a violation punishable by death." Everett kept his hands visible. "I didn't know. My transport crashed." He nodded toward the injured Vorak. "Your companion needs immediate medical attention." Her eyes narrowed. "You presume to tell me about the condition of my own hunt bond? The finest Imperial veterinarians will attend to Vorak when my ship arrives. With respect, Your Majesty, that creature will be dead before any ship lands in this storm. The wound has severed a major artery. I can see the blood pressure dropping from here." The Queen's expression darkened. "You know nothing of Kree physiology." "I know enough about comparative xenobiology to recognize catastrophic blood loss across most species," Everett countered, surprised by his own boldness. "I'm a combat medic. I can help." A low, mournful cry from the Vorak seemed to pierce through the Queen's composure. For a moment, her eyes unfocused, and she swayed slightly. When she looked at Everett again, there was something new in her expression. Desperation. "If Vorak dies, the consequences will extend far beyond this hunt," she said quietly. "You claim you can help? I can try." The rifle lowered slightly. "What do you need?" "My medical kit, for starters, and your help." The Queen hesitated, then gestured with her free hand. "Proceed. But understand this. If Vorak dies by your hand, I will ensure your death lasts days." Everett nodded grimly. "Fair enough." He moved cautiously toward the fallen predator, speaking softly as he approached. The creature's eyes, intelligent and pain-filled, tracked his movement. 6 pupils contracted against glowing amber irises. "I'm going to help you," Everett said, not knowing if the creature understood, but keeping his tone gentle and even, the same way he'd approach an injured stallion back home. The Queen watched, her rifle lowered but still gripped tightly. "Vorak will not harm you unless I command it, even injured. He could tear you apart in seconds." "That's reassuring," Everett muttered, kneeling beside the massive creature. He carefully examined the wound, noting the unusual silver-blue blood that seemed to crystallize at the edges of the injury. "I need to stop the bleeding first, then clean and close the wound. Our blood crystallizes when exposed to certain atmospheric conditions," the Queen explained, moving closer. "It's a defensive adaptation, but it complicates healing." Everett nodded, already retrieving supplies from his kit. "We need to work quickly then. Can you assist?" Something like surprise flickered across her face. "You would have the Queen of the Korean Empire serve as your assistant?" "Right now, I don't need a queen. I need someone with steady hands who cares whether this creature lives or dies." He held out a pair of surgical gloves. "Do you qualify?" For a moment, he thought he'd overstepped fatally. Then, remarkably, Queen Cora set down her rifle and took the gloves. "What do you require of me, medic?" "I need you to hold this clamp exactly where I place it, while I work on repairing the artery." As they worked together, the storm intensified around them. Lightning struck closer, the air becoming thick with electrical charge. Everett's hair stood on end, but his hands remained steady as he sutured the damaged blood vessel. "The storm is getting worse," the Queen observed, her own hands maintaining perfect pressure on the clamp. "We should move Vorak to shelter." Everett shook his head. "Moving him now could rupture everything I've just repaired. We stay until I've stabilized him. We'll all die if we remain exposed. Then we'll work faster." Everett looked up at her. "Hold this suture." To his surprise, she complied without argument. As they worked, Everett noticed something unusual. Whenever the Vorak's pain intensified, the Queen would wince simultaneously. When the creature's breathing steadied, after Everett administered a pain reliever, the tension in the Queen's shoulders visibly eased. "You share a bond with him," Everett observed, applying a regenerative gel to the wound. "It's more than just a Mount Rider relationship. Cora was silent for a moment. The hunt bond is sacred among my people. Vorak and I are connected through what your crude translation would call nerve binding. I feel what he feels. He knows my thoughts. It is how we have ruled the stars for 10,000 years. That's remarkable, Everett said, genuinely fascinated. And dangerous, I'd imagine. You have no idea. She looked at him with sudden intensity. This information is not common knowledge outside the Empire. If you survive this encounter, I suggest you forget it. Noted. Everett continued his work, applying a synthetic skin graft over the repaired tissues. The bleeding stopped, and I've administered antibiotics and regenerative compounds. They're designed for humanoid use, but they should be compatible with his physiology based on what I'm seeing. Will he live? If we can get him proper care within the next 12 hours, yes. Relief washed over her features, quickly replaced by the regal mask. My Imperial shuttle will arrive once the storm passes. That might be too late. We need to get him to better shelter now and continue treatment. A massive lightning strike hit nearby, showering them with crystalline fragments. The Vorak growled, attempting to rise. Easy, Everett soothed, placing a hand on the creature's flank. To his surprise, the predator settled, its amber eyes fixed on him with unsettling intelligence. He trusts you, Cora said, sounding both impressed and suspicious. That is unusual. I have that effect on patients. Everett scanned their surroundings. There's a cave formation about 200 meters east. If we can get him there, we'll have better protection. Vorak weighs nearly a ton. How do you propose we move him? Everett grinned. You're going to hate this part. It took them nearly an hour to coax, drag, and guide the injured Vorak to the cave. By the time they arrived, all three were exhausted. The creature collapsed near the rear of the cavern. Its breathing labored but stronger than before. Everett immediately set up a portable medical monitoring system, attaching sensors to the Vorak's hide. His vitals are stabilizing, but there's something odd in his blood chemistry. Cora knelt beside him, her armor now smeared with dirt and her own mount's blood. The transformation from imperious queen to concerned companion was remarkable. What do you see? She asked. Everett showed her the readout. These markers here, they indicate some kind of genetic degradation. It's not related to the injury. Her expression darkened. That is not your concern. It is if it affects his recovery. Everett met her gaze steadily. I'm trying to save his life. Anything that might complicate that is absolutely my concern. For a long moment, they stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Finally, the queen sighed. The Vorak species is dying, she admitted. A genetic flaw that appeared generations ago has been spreading through the bloodline. Each generation is weaker than the last. Vorak is one of the last purebloods, and even he carries the flaw. A genetic disorder? Everett frowned, looking back at the readings. That would explain these markers. Is there no treatment? Our scientists have tried for centuries. The flaw is tied to the very genes that enable the nerve binding. To cure one would destroy the other. And without the bond? Without the bond, we lose what makes us Korean, she finished. Our empire is built on the synergy between ruler and Vorak. It is the source of our strength, our unity, our very identity. Everett considered this. So when you said the consequences of Vorak's death would extend beyond this hunt, it would be seen as an omen, a sign of weakness. The War Council would lose faith in my rule. Our enemies would sense vulnerability. She looked at the massive creature with genuine affection. And I would lose my oldest friend. The vulnerability in her voice struck Everett more powerfully than he expected. In that moment, she wasn't the fearsome Empress of 1,000 worlds. She was simply someone afraid of losing a beloved companion. I'll do everything I can, he promised softly. She nodded, composing herself. Your transport, were there other survivors? Everett shook his head. No, just me. And what brought a Colonial Alliance medic to the edges of Korean space? Medical supply run to the border colonies. We took a shortcut through an unmapped sector and ran into the storm. He shrugged. Wrong place, wrong time. Or perhaps the right place at the right time. She studied him curiously. For Vorak, at least. Before Everett could respond, the monitoring system beeped urgently. The Vorak's vitals were fluctuating. Something's wrong, Everett said, moving quickly to the creature's side. The wound was stable, but the predator's breathing had become erratic. I think he's having a reaction to one of the medications. What can you do? Cora demanded, her composure fracturing. I need to flush his system and administer a counteragent. Everett dug through his medical kit. But I don't have enough. The supplies on my transport, they're still viable. If the medical bay survived the crash, yes. Cora stood. I will retrieve them. In that storm, it's suicide. For a human, perhaps. She reactivated her helmet, the ornate armor sealing around her face. Korean physiology is more resilient, and my armor will provide protection. Tell me what to look for. Despite his protests, the Queen was adamant. Everett described the medical supplies and their likely location in the wreckage, watching with concern as she stepped out into the raging electrical storm. Alone with the injured predator, Everett continued monitoring its condition. The creature's eyes remained fixed on him, unnervingly aware. She's something else, isn't she? Everett said conversationally, checking the wound dressing. Terrifying and impressive in equal measure. You picked a hell of a bonded partner. The Vorak made a rumbling sound that might almost have been agreement. You understand me, don't you? Everett reached out cautiously, placing his hand on the creature's massive head. The scales were smooth and warm, vibrating slightly with each breath. More than just an animal. The nerve binding must enhance cognitive function somehow. The Vorak blinked slowly, its 6 pupilled eyes contracting and expanding in sequence. I wish I could help with the genetic issue, Everett continued, mostly to keep himself calm as he monitored the predator's declining condition. Genetic engineering isn't my specialty, but I've seen similar disorders in livestock breeding programs. The solution usually involves introducing new genetic material or editing out the flawed sequences. The monitoring system beeped again, more urgently. The Vorak's body temperature was rising dangerously. Hang on, Everett urged, using the last of his fever-reducing medication. Your stubborn queen will be back soon. As if summoned by his words, Cora reappeared at the cave entrance, carrying a salvaged medical container. Her armor was scorched in several places, and one pauldron was completely shattered, but she seemed otherwise unharmed. I found your medical bay, she said, dropping the container beside him. Most of it was destroyed, but I recovered what I could. This is perfect, Everett said, quickly opening the container. Inside were several intact vials of counteragents and stabilizers. You're just in time. He's going into systemic shock. Together, they worked to stabilize the Vorak, administering the counteragents and cooling the predator's overheating body. Gradually, the creature's condition improved, its breathing becoming more regular. He's stabilizing, Everett said after an hour of intense treatment. The danger has passed, for now. Cora removed her damaged helmet, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. You have my gratitude, medic. Everett, he supplied. My name is Everett. Everett, she repeated, the name sounding exotic in her accented voice. You have shown exceptional skill and courage today. The Korean Empire rewards such qualities. I don't need a reward. I was just doing my job. Nevertheless, she settled beside him, leaning against the cave wall. Once my Imperial shuttle arrives, you will be taken to our medical research facility on Altair. Your insights on Vorak's condition may prove valuable. Everett raised an eyebrow. Is that an invitation or an abduction? Does it matter? There was a hint of amusement in her voice. You have nowhere else to go, and you've expressed interest in our genetic problem. Consider it an opportunity. When you put it that way, how can I refuse? The storm outside began to subside, the frequency of lightning strikes diminishing. In the relative quiet, Everett became acutely aware of the Queen's proximity. Despite her alien features, there was something undeniably captivating about her. A combination of strength, intelligence, and the rare vulnerability she'd shown regarding her bonded companion. You said the nerve binding is what makes the Kree who they are, Everett said after a while. How does it work, exactly? Cora considered him for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. The bond forms during a sacred ritual when a royal child comes of age. Their nervous system and that of a young Vorak are temporarily linked through a biochemical catalyst. Most candidates die in the process. Those who survive emerge forever changed, carrying a piece of each other's consciousness. That sounds intense. It is excruciating, she said matter-of-factly, but necessary. The bond allows us to think as one when needed, combining human reason with predator instinct. In battle, it makes us unstoppable. In governance, it balances mercy with necessary cruelty. And the genetic flaw? Each generation, fewer royals survive the bonding. Each generation, the Vorak bloodline grows weaker. Her voice tightened. I am the last successfully bonded queen. If no solution is found, I will be the last Kree ruler to carry the true legacy of our people. There must be research attempts at genetic therapy. Extensive, but unsuccessful. The genes responsible for the bonding capability are the same ones degrading. She looked at the sleeping Vorak. We face extinction, not as a species, but as a culture, as the power we have been for millennia. Everett fell silent, contemplating the enormity of what she'd shared. An entire civilization's way of life, hanging by a genetic thread. Your empire is known for its military might, he said eventually, not for sharing its problems with outsiders. Perhaps that is part of our problem. She turned to face him fully. Pride has prevented us from seeking solutions beyond our borders. Yet here you are, an alien medic who saved my bonded when our own methods would have failed. Before Everett could respond, a distant rumbling filled the air. The Queen stood, stepping to the cave entrance. My shuttle approaches, she announced. Gather your equipment. We depart immediately. The Imperial shuttle was unlike anything Everett had ever seen. A sleek, predatory vessel that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Inside, a team of Kree medical specialists waited, rushing to attend to the injured Vorak under Everett's guidance. As they lifted off from the death world, Everett watched through a viewing port as the electrical storms resumed their relentless assault on the crystalline landscape below. By all rights, he should have died there. Instead, he found himself bound for the heart of an empire that most Alliance citizens would never see. Cora appeared beside him, now dressed in fresh royal armor, her damaged pieces discarded. Your actions today will not be forgotten. Everett of the Colonial Alliance. Just doing what needed to be done, he replied, still watching the planet recede below them. Few would have approached a wounded Vorak. Fewer still would have stood their ground before a Kree queen. There was a note of respect in her voice. You possess unusual courage. Or unusual stupidity, he quipped. The jury's still out. To his surprise, she laughed, a melodic sound that transformed her severe features. Perhaps both. Such qualities often coexist. As the shuttle accelerated into hyperspace, Everett couldn't help but wonder what he was getting himself into. The Kree Empire was known for its ruthless expansion, its technological superiority, and its isolation from galactic politics. And he was now headed for its closely guarded inner sanctums. Your medical skills will be welcome at Altair, Cora continued. Our research facility houses the finest minds in the Empire, all working to solve the genetic degradation. I'm just a field medic, not a genetic specialist. You offer a fresh perspective, unencumbered by centuries of failed approaches. She turned to face him fully. Sometimes, that is precisely what is needed. The journey to Altair took 3 days. During that time, Everett divided his attention between monitoring Vorek's recovery and learning about Korean culture from the Queen and her attendants. The more he learned, the more fascinated he became. The Korean Empire had ruled their sector of space for over 10 millennia, their dominance assured by the unique abilities granted through the nerve binding. Their queens, for they were a matriarchal society, commanded absolute loyalty, their decisions guided by the predatory instincts of their bonded Voraks. But beneath the surface of their strength lay vulnerability. The genetic flaw had been present for nearly 5 centuries, gradually weakening each generation. Cora had been the only successful binding in her cohort of royal candidates. Her younger sister had died in the attempt, along with 17 other potentials. The War Council grows restless, Cora confided, as they observed Vorak in the shuttle's medical bay. The Predator was recovering well, his wound healing cleanly under Everett's care. They fear I will be the last queen, that our way of life will end with me. No pressure there, Everett remarked, adjusting the creature's medication. Indeed. She watched him work, her expression thoughtful. You show no fear of him, even knowing what he is capable of. He's my patient. Fear doesn't help either of us. A practical approach. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. When we reach Altair, you will encounter resistance. The research teams have worked for generations without success. They will not welcome an outsider's interference. I'm used to resistance, Everett assured her. Combat medics rarely get a warm welcome anywhere. This will be different. Her amethyst eyes held his. My decision to bring you will be questioned, perhaps even challenged. The Korean do not easily trust aliens, especially humans. Then why bring me at all? Because Vorak trusts you, she said simply. And because I believe you may see what our scientists have missed. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries come from the most unlikely sources. When they arrived at Altair, Everett understood what she meant about resistance. The reception waiting in the docking bay was decidedly cold. A group of stern-faced Korean officials and scientists whose expressions ranged from skepticism to open hostility. At their forefront stood a tall, severe-looking Korean male with elaborate facial markings denoting high rank. His silver-blue skin was darker than Cora's, and his eyes were a piercing cobalt blue. "Welcome home, Majesty," he said, bowing deeply. "We received word of Vorek's injury. The medical team is prepared." "Thank you, Zephyr," Cora replied, her tone shifting to a more formal register. "Allow me to present Everett, a Colonial Alliance medic whose skills saved Vorek's life. He will be assisting our research teams." Zephyr's eyes narrowed. "With respect, Majesty, bringing an outsider to Altair violates centuries of protocol. The genetic research is classified at the highest levels. Protocol serves the Empire, Zephyr, not the other way around." Cora's voice hardened. "Everett has already demonstrated more progress in treating Vorek's condition than our teams have shown in decades. He will have full access to our facilities." The tension in the air was palpable. Everett could sense the power dynamics at play, Cora's authority being subtly challenged, the political implications of his presence creating ripples through the assembled officials. "As you command, Majesty." Zephyr bowed again, but the gesture lacked sincerity. "I shall inform the War Council of this development." "Do so," Cora replied dismissively. "Now, see to Vorak's transfer to the medical facility. Everett will oversee the process." As the group dispersed to carry out her orders, Cora turned to Everett. "Zephyr is my chief advisor and head of the War Council. His cooperation will be essential, but difficult to earn. He seems devoted to tradition. The Korean way has kept us dominant for millennia. Change does not come easily to us. She gestured for him to follow her. Come, I will show you to your quarters. Then the research facility. The research complex at Altair was a marvel of bioengineering and technological advancement. Sprawling laboratories housed equipment far beyond colonial alliance capabilities, with teams of scientists working on various aspects of the genetic problem. Everett was assigned a private laboratory adjacent to Vorak's recovery chamber, allowing him to monitor the predator while studying the extensive research data. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming. Centuries of genetic analysis, failed treatments, and increasingly desperate attempts to correct the flaw. For the first week, he focused on understanding the basics of Korean biology and the specifics of the nerve-binding process. The biochemical catalyst used in the ritual was a naturally occurring compound found only in the organs of mature Voraks. This substance temporarily broke down the neural barriers between species, allowing the formation of permanent pathways. The genetic flaw appeared to be a mutation in the receptors that responded to this catalyst. Each generation, these receptors became less effective, requiring more of the catalyst to achieve bonding, often more than the candidates could survive. It's like a key that's slowly changing shape, Everett explained to Cora during one of her daily visits. Each generation, the lock requires a more precisely crafted key, but the material you're using to make that key is becoming more brittle. Can the key be reforged? She asked, studying the genetic models he'd created. Possibly, but I think we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Everett highlighted a section of the Vorak genome on the holographic display. Instead of forcing the old key to work, we might need to change the lock. Cora's eyes widened. Gene editing? Our scientists attempted this decades ago. The subjects died in agony. Because they were trying to preserve too much, Everett argued. Look at these markers. They indicate regions of the genome that have remained stable despite the overall degradation. If we focus on strengthening these regions, while allowing controlled mutation in others, you're suggesting we allow the bond to evolve rather than preserve it exactly as it was. Evolution is how species survive changing environments. Maybe it's time for the bond to adapt too. The Queen was silent for a long moment, considering his proposal. This approach contradicts centuries of Korean doctrine. The sanctity of the original bond is fundamental to our cultural identity. With respect, Your Majesty, your cultural identity is facing extinction if something doesn't change. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Zephyr, accompanied by two other members of the War Council, a female introduced as Voss and a male named Thorn. Majesty, Zephyr began, his tone formal, but edged with urgency. The Council requests your immediate attention. We have received disturbing reports from the outer territories. Cora straightened, instantly alert. What reports? The Vex conglomerate has mobilized their fleet. 3 border outposts have gone silent. Everett recognized the name. The Vex were a rival power in this sector, a coalition of species united by shared technological interests, rather than military might. Prepare the dreadnought Sovereign's will for immediate departure, Cora commanded. I will join you shortly. After the council members left, she turned to Everett, her expression grave. The Vex have been watching for signs of weakness. Vorak's injury may have reached their intelligence networks. You're going to war? I'm going to prevent one, if possible. She gestured to the research data. Continue your work. This development makes it even more urgent. I'll need access to more detailed genetic sequencing equipment, Everett said, and samples from both successfully and unsuccessfully bonded pairs. You shall have whatever you require. She hesitated, then added, Should I not return, my authority directive will ensure your continued access. The implication was clear. She was facing genuine danger. Everett felt an unexpected surge of concern. Be careful out there. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Concern, Everett? How uncharacteristically sentimental. Professional interest, he countered. I've invested too much time in this project to break in a new royal patron. Her smile widened briefly, before the regal mask returned. I shall endeavor not to inconvenience your research schedule by dying. After she departed, Everett threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. The political situation added pressure he hadn't anticipated. If the Vex were mobilizing against perceived Kree weakness, the genetic solution wasn't just a matter of cultural preservation. It could prevent interstellar war. For the next 2 weeks, he worked tirelessly, often sleeping in the laboratory. The Kree scientists, initially resistant to his presence, gradually began to collaborate as his unorthodox approaches showed promise. One researcher in particular, a younger female named Kale, became a valuable ally. Her expertise in Kree genetic engineering complementing his medical background. Your approach is unconventional, she admitted, as they examined the results of their latest simulation. But the models suggest it could work. The key is minimizing the changes while maximizing stability. Everett explained. We're not trying to reverse the mutation completely. That's proven impossible. Instead, we're guiding it toward a stable variant. A controlled evolution, Kale mused. The Council will resist this concept. They'll resist extinction more, Everett said grimly. News from the border conflict was sporadic. The Kree maintained tight control over information, but Everett gathered that negotiations with the Vex were proceeding poorly. Twice, reports of skirmishes reached the research facility, raising tensions among the staff. Then, 3 weeks after Cora's departure, alarms blared throughout the complex. Kale rushed into the laboratory, her normally composed features tense with worry. The Vex have launched a major offensive, she reported. The Queen's dreadnought is engaged in battle. All research personnel are ordered to secure vital data for potential evacuation. Everett's stomach tightened. What about Vorak? He will be transported to the secure bunkers beneath the facility. He's still recovering. Moving him could compromise his healing. Everett gathered his research tablets. I need to go with him. That is not protocol. To hell with protocol, Everett snapped. He's my patient, and I'm not abandoning him now. The research complex descended into controlled chaos as staff secured sensitive materials and prepared for possible attack. Everett supervised Vorak's transfer to the underground medical bay, ensuring the Predator's comfort and stability throughout the process. The massive creature seemed agitated, its amber eyes constantly searching the room, its powerful muscles tense beneath the healing wound. He senses the Queen's danger, Kale explained, helping Everett set up monitoring equipment. The nerve binding transmits emotional states across vast distances. Is she in that much trouble? Everett asked, concerned. The Vex outnumber our forces 3-1. They have deployed their new phase shift technology, which our defenses have not yet adapted to counter. Kale's voice was clinical, but fear showed in her eyes. If the Queen falls. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Hours passed in tense waiting. Occasional updates reached them. The battle continued. Casualties mounting on both sides. The Queen's dreadnought had sustained heavy damage, but remained operational. Then, abruptly, Vorak began convulsing. The monitoring system screamed warnings as the Predator's vital signs spiked dangerously. What's happening? Kale demanded, helping Everett restrain the thrashing creature. Some kind of neural shock, Everett guessed, administering a stabilizing agent. The bond must be transmitting extreme trauma. The Queen, Kale whispered. She must be gravely injured. Vorak's condition deteriorated rapidly. Despite Everett's best efforts, the Predator's systems began shutting down, one by one, a cascade failure triggered by whatever catastrophe had befallen Cora. We're losing him, Everett said, desperately trying to counteract the decline. The bond is killing him. In that moment of crisis, clarity struck. The bond, The very thing that made the Kree powerful was now their greatest vulnerability. If Korra died, Vorak would follow. If Vorak died, the Queen's ability to rule would be crippled. But the genetic therapy they'd been developing might offer a solution, not just for future generations, but for this exact crisis. Kale, get me the experimental gene editor and a sample of the stabilized receptor compound we synthesized yesterday. Everett ordered. Now! That treatment hasn't been tested, she protested. It could kill him instantly. He's dying anyway, Everett countered. This is our only chance. While Kale retrieved the materials, Everett prepared Vorak for the desperate procedure. The gene editor was a marvel of cryon technology, a device capable of making targeted modifications to living tissue in real time, guided by pre-programmed parameters. "What are you doing?" demanded a new voice. Zephyr stood in the doorway, his face twisted with fury. "Step away from the Royal Vorak immediately." "He's dying," Everett said without pausing his preparations. "The Queen is injured, possibly dying, and the Bond is dragging Vorak down with her." "Our medical team will handle this," Zephyr insisted, signaling to guards behind him. "Your medical team has had centuries to solve this problem and failed," Everett snapped. "Every second we waste decreases his chances of survival." Zephyr stepped forward menacingly. "This is treason. The sacred bond cannot be tampered with." Kale unexpectedly interceded, placing herself between Everett and Zephyr. "The Queen authorized this research. Counselor, she granted him full authority over Vorak's treatment." "The Queen may already be dead," Zephyr hissed. "Then we have nothing to lose," Everett retorted, loading the synthesized compound into the gene editor. "And everything to gain." For a tense moment, it seemed Zephyr would physically intervene. Then, remarkably, he stepped back. "Proceed, but know that if Vorak dies by your hand, your execution will be public and prolonged." Everett nodded grimly, then turned his full attention to the procedure. The gene editor would deliver the modified receptor compound directly to Vorak's neural tissue, theoretically creating a buffer zone in the bond, maintaining the connection while protecting both participants from the other's physical trauma. "Beginning application," he announced, activating the device. A fine mist of glowing particles enveloped Vorak's head, being drawn in through the predator's nostrils and eye membranes. "Targeting neural receptors now." The monitoring system showed the compound spreading through Vorak's nervous system, seeking out the bond receptors. For several agonizing minutes, there was no change in the predator's declining condition. Then, gradually, the vital signs began to stabilize. The convulsions ceased, replaced by steady, if shallow, breathing. "It's working," Kale whispered, amazed. "The neural patterns are reorganizing." "The buffer is establishing itself," Everett confirmed, studying the data. "It's not severing the bond, just insulating it enough to prevent fatal feedback." Zephyr stepped closer, his hostility tempered by cautious hope. "Will this save the Queen as well?" "If she's still alive, yes. The modification works both ways." Everett adjusted the treatment parameters. "The bond remains intact, but each participant is protected from lethal trauma in the other." As they watched, Vorak's condition continued to improve. The predator's eyes opened, focusing with newfound clarity, despite the obvious pain still present. A communications officer burst into the medical bay. "Counselor Zephyr, we've received a transmission from the Dreadnought. The Queen lives, but is gravely wounded. They are returning to Altair immediately." Relief washed over the room. Zephyr turned to Everett, his expression complex, a mixture of lingering suspicion and reluctant respect. "It seems we owe you a debt, human," he said stiffly. "The Queen and Vorak both survived because of your intervention." "Save the gratitude until we're certain they're stable," Everett advised, still monitoring the predator's vital signs. "This is only the beginning." When Korra's shuttle returned to Altair 8 hours later, she was barely clinging to life, A Vex phase weapon had penetrated her armor, causing massive internal damage. The Imperial physicians had kept her alive, but her condition was critical. Everett was waiting in the medical bay when they brought her in. The sight of her, pale, bloodied, her regal presence diminished by injury, affected him more deeply than he expected. "The bond is stabilized on Vorak's end," he informed the lead physician. "But the Queen will need the same treatment to complete the protection." The physician, an older Kriean with elaborate rank markings, looked skeptical. "This experimental procedure has not been approved for use on Her Majesty." "It's already active through half the bond," Everett argued. "Completing it is her best chance for survival." A weak voice interrupted the debate. "Do it!" All eyes turned to Cora, who had regained consciousness despite her injuries. Her amethyst eyes found Everett's. "I trust him," she whispered. "Proceed." The physician hesitated, then stepped aside. "As the Queen commands." Everett administered the gene therapy with the same precision he'd shown with Vorak. As the modified receptors integrated with Cora's neural pathways, the monitors showed immediate improvement in both her condition and Vorak's. "The buffer is complete," he announced after an hour of tense observation. "Both sides of the bond are now protected against fatal feedback." Cora's eyes fluttered open again. "Everett," she murmured, "you've changed the bond. I can feel it. Different, but still there." "I had no choice," he explained gently. "You were both dying." "Not a criticism," she assured him weakly. "An observation. It feels clearer somehow, less overwhelming." Over the next several days, both Cora and Vorak recovered steadily. The modified bond proved more stable than anyone had anticipated, preserving the mental connection while mitigating the physical risks. News from the front lines was mixed. The Vex offensive had been halted, but at great cost to both sides. A fragile ceasefire was in place, while diplomats from both powers discussed terms. "The Vex sensed our vulnerability," Cora explained during one of Everett's daily examinations. She was sitting up now, her strength returning, though she remained in the medical facility. "They have been monitoring the genetic degradation for generations, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." "How did they know about it?" Everett asked, checking her neural readings. "Spies, defectors, observation," she shrugged slightly. "The symptoms become apparent to those who know what to look for. Fewer royal candidates surviving the bonding, Vorak's becoming more scarce. The gradual shift in our military tactics away from bonded combat units. And now?" "Now they have requested a direct meeting." Her expression was guarded. "Their regent wishes to discuss your genetic therapy." Everett blinked in surprise. "My therapy? Why would they care about that?" "Because, Everett," she said slowly, "the Vex suffer from a similar genetic flaw. Their phase shift technology, their greatest advantage over us, requires a neural interface that has become increasingly unstable in recent generations." The implications were staggering. "They attacked you because they're desperate for a solution to their own problem." "So it would seem." She leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "Which gives us an unexpected advantage in negotiations." 2 days later, Everett found himself in an unprecedented position, seated at a diplomatic conference between the Kriean Empire and the Vex conglomerate, his research at the center of discussion. The Vex regent was not what he had expected. Rather than a fearsome warrior, she was a slender, almost fragile-looking being with translucent skin through which complex circuitry could be seen pulsing. Her name was Farah, and her interest in Everett's work was intense and personal. "Your approach to genetic stabilization is elegant," she said, after reviewing his data. "Our scientists have pursued similar paths without success." "The key was accepting controlled evolution rather than fighting it," Everett explained. "Trying to preserve the exact original state was doomed to failure." Cora, seated at the head of the conference table with Vorak lounging behind her, watched the exchange with calculated interest. She had recovered remarkably well, though her movements still betrayed occasional pain. "We propose an exchange," she said finally. "Access to Dr. Everett's genetic therapy in return for cessation of all hostilities and open sharing of phase shift technology." The Vex Regent's circuitry pulsed more rapidly, their version of heightened emotion. "Your terms are bold, Queen Cora." "They reflect the value of what we offer," Cora replied smoothly. "Without this therapy, your neural interfaces will continue to degrade. Within 3 generations, your technological advantage will be unusable." Farah was silent for a long moment, communing with her advisors through their shared neural network. Finally, she inclined her head. "We accept, with one condition. Dr. Everett must personally oversee the adaptation of the therapy to Vex physiology at our research facility on Xylos." All eyes turned to Everett. He hadn't anticipated becoming a pivotal figure in interstellar politics when he'd crashed on that death world weeks ago. "I'm just a combat medic," he said, feeling suddenly out of his depth. "Not a diplomat or a genetic specialist." "You are whatever circumstance requires you to be," Cora said, her eyes meeting his across the table. "As we all are." In that moment, Everett understood that his life had irrevocably changed. The Colonial Alliance seemed a distant memory now. His future lay here, among the stars, bridging worlds that had been divided for centuries. "I'll do it," he said finally, "on the condition that all research remains open source between both powers, and any medical applications derived from it are made available to all species who need them, including the Colonial Alliance." Cora's eyebrows rose slightly at his boldness. The Vex Regent's circuitry flickered in what might have been amusement. "Acceptable," Farah said before Cora could respond. "We have much to learn from each other. It seems—" The treaty was signed that day, a historic alliance between ancient enemies, brokered by an accidental diplomat from a distant colony. In the months that followed, Everett divided his time between Altair and Xylos, overseeing the adaptation of the genetic therapy for both species. The modified bond proved even more advantageous than anticipated, offering Kriean rulers greater control and clarity without sacrificing the predatory instincts that had made them formidable. For the Vex, the therapy stabilized their neural interfaces, allowing safer and more precise integration with their phase shift technology. The exchange of knowledge between the two powers accelerated scientific progress exponentially, opening new possibilities for both civilizations. And throughout it all, Everett found himself growing closer to Cora. Their professional relationship gradually evolved into something more complex, a mutual respect that deepened into genuine affection, despite the cultural and biological differences between them. "Your people will be wondering what became of you," Cora remarked one evening as they watched Vorak and several younger predators exercise in the royal hunting grounds. The Queen had made a full recovery, though she carried new scars, both visible and hidden. "The Colonial Alliance must have declared you missing, presumed dead by now." "Probably," Everett agreed. "I should send a message at some point." "Will you return to them?" The question was posed casually, but he caught the tension beneath it. "I'm not sure there's a place for me there anymore," he admitted. "What would I say? Sorry I'm late. I was busy preventing an interstellar war and solving a genetic crisis for 2 ancient powers." She laughed, the sound still rare enough to delight him. "You could simply say you found a more interesting position." "As the royal veterinarian," he teased. "As royal consort, perhaps," she replied, her tone light but her eyes serious. "If that holds any appeal." Everett stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Are you proposing to me, Your Majesty?" "Merely suggesting a possibility." She turned to face him fully. "The bond you created, the evolution you guided, has changed more than just our genetics. Everett, it has changed our perspective. For millennia, we believed our strength lay in isolation and purity. You have shown us the power of adaptation, of embracing the new rather than clinging to the old. That's quite a compliment, he said, genuinely moved. But, royal consort, wouldn't that cause a diplomatic incident? Undoubtedly, she agreed with a smile. But I find I have developed a taste for diplomatic incidents since meeting you. He stepped closer, considering her words. The idea was absurd on one level. A ranch boy from the colonies becoming consort to the most powerful queen in the galaxy. Yet, on another level, it felt like the natural culmination of the journey that had begun on that storm-ravaged death world. I'd need to maintain my research, he said after a moment. And my independence. Naturally, I would expect nothing less. And I have conditions regarding healthcare access throughout the Empire. Her smile widened. Already negotiating terms? How very Korean of you. I learned from the best, he countered, reaching out to take her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Their fingers intertwined, silver blue against tan, a visual representation of the unlikely bridge they had built between worlds. In the distance, Vorak watched them with his intelligent amber eyes, the Predator's approval evident in his relaxed posture. The bond hummed between Queen and Beast, changed yet familiar, evolved yet stable. A new chapter in an ancient legacy. Well then, Everett of the Colonial Alliance, Cora said softly. Shall we rewrite history together? Looking into her amethyst eyes, Everett found his answer clear and certain. I thought you'd never ask.